Hari Hari Bol.
Lord Shri Radha Radhakanta Ki Jai. Shri Radha Namadar Ki Jai. Lord Shri Gornitai Ki Jai. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhaktivinoda Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Ki Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prashanine. Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Prasajade Shatarine. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, entitled The Status Quo, Chapter 2, Remembrance of Lord Krishna, and today's text is 27. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Text 27, please repeat. Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Please chant.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Sharayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Yamano Pavane Kuja.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Charayan Yaharad Vibhu.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe. Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Charayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Charayan Yaharad Vibhu.
Shadayan Vyaharad Vibhu.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Yamuno Pavane Kuja.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Vija Sankulitan Gripe.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
Parito Vatsaparvatsam.
word synonyms, please repeat. Parita.
Parita.
Surrounded by.
Surrounded by.
Vatsapai.
Vatsapai.
Cowherd boys.
Cowherd boys.
Vatsan.
Vatsan.
Calves.
Calves.
Charayan.
Charayan.
Herding, tending. Vyaharat.
Vyaharat.
Enjoyed by traveling.
Enjoyed by traveling.
Vibhu.
Vibhu.
The Almighty.
The Almighty.
Yamuna.
Yamuna.
The Yamuna River.
The Yamuna River.
Upavane.
Upavane.
Gardens on the shore.
Gardens on the shore.
Kujat.
Kujat.
Vibrated by the voice.
Vibrated by the voice.
Dvija.
Dvija.
The twice-born birds.
The twice-born birds.
Sankulita.
Sankulita.
Densely situated.
Densely situated.
Angripe.
Angripe.
In the trees.
In the trees.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. This is Uddhava speaking to Vidura. In his childhood, the Almighty Lord was surrounded by cowherd boys and calves, and thus he traveled on the shore of the Yamuna River, through gardens densely covered with trees and filled with vibrations of chirping birds. Purport. Nanda Maharaj was a landholder for King Kamsa, but because by caste he was a Vaishya, a member of the mercantile and agricultural community, he maintained thousands of cows. So the Kshatriya actually owns the land. So the Kshatriya here, the king, is Kamsa. Yet he would give the land for use. So the Vaishyas would utilize the land, for example, for business and cow protection and agriculture. But technically the land belongs to the king. It is the duty of the Vaishyas to give protection to the cows, just as the Kshatriyas are to give protection to the human beings. Because the Lord was a child, he was put in charge of the calves with his cowherd boyfriends. So the little boys would take care of the calves, and the bigger boys would take care of the cows. So there's a day on our calendar which celebrates the day when Krishna graduated from being a calf herder to a cow herder. You know what that day is on our calendar? Gopashtami. Coming up soon. He was put in charge of the calves with his cowherd boyfriends. These cowherd boys were great rishis and yogis in their previous births. And after many such pious births, they gained the association of the Lord and could play with him on equal terms. Such cowherd boys never cared to know who Krishna was, but they played with him as a most intimate and lovable friend. Means they didn't care to know that he was God, because that would interrupt their bhava, their feelings of love with Krishna. How can you be intimate with someone when you know their big exalted position? They were so fond of the Lord that at night they would only think of the next morning, when they would be able to meet the Lord and go together to the forest for cow herding. So in Goloka, we find that nobody actually sleeps. During the day, the cowherd boys are out all day long playing with Krishna and Balaram. And at night, when they're so-called sleeping, they're actually relishing the pastimes while they're sleeping. They're thinking about how tomorrow we're going to do this and that, and remember we did this and that today, and tomorrow we're going to do this and that. So, technically they're not really sleeping. They're always engaged in Krishna Lila. Similarly with the gopis. During the day, Krishna would go out with the cowherd boys, and the gopis would be at home, lamenting that he's not present, and just thinking about how when the night comes, they're going to steal away from their homes and go meet Krishna in the forest for dancing and playing. So 24/7, they're just absorbed in Krishna Lila. The forests on the shore of the Yamuna are all beautiful gardens full of trees of mango, jackfruit, apples, guava, oranges, grapes, berries, palm fruit, and so many other plants and fragrant flowers. And because the forest was on the bank of the Yamuna, naturally there were ducks, cranes, and peacocks on the branches of the trees. All these trees and birds and beasts were pious living entities, born in the transcendental abode of Vrindavan, just to give pleasure to the Lord and his eternal associates, the cowherd boys. Now we hear that there's no birth in the spiritual world, just as there's no death. But here we are hearing that these trees and birds and beasts were so pious that they took birth in the transcendental realm of Vrindavan. So this is the Boma Leela that we're discussing here in the 10th canto. Krishna's pastimes as he appeared on earth. When he appeared on earth, he performed amazing pastimes that resemble pastimes in the spiritual world plus more. His childhood pastimes are not existing, actually, in the aprakat, or the unmanifested realm. In Goloka, Krishna is Navayovanam. He's eternally a 16-year-old boy. And his childhood pastimes don't actually take place there. So the Gaudiya Vaishnavas have determined that Krishna's Boma Leela, that Leela that he performs here on earth, from his so-called birth to his childhood pastimes, are more sweet than even the Leelas that happen in Goloka. So they take great relish in the childhood pastimes of Krishna. So here it said that those who were very pious took birth in the transcendental abode of Vrindavan to play the part of trees, birds, beasts, etc. So when a living entity becomes perfect in their practice of Krishna consciousness, they're no longer a sadhaka, but they're now a siddha, or perfected person. Then that perfected devotee takes one more quote-unquote birth. And that birth is in Boma Leela. So when we have birthdays, we often sing to the devotee, "May you never take birth again. May you never take birth again." But actually, we will take, if we become perfect, one more birth, and that's in Boma Leela. But we take birth from a gopi in Krishna's Leela. And we are born with that identity, which is our eternal identity. But we get trained up in Boma Leela in the final details of that unique service and position and relationship that we have with Krishna. And then, when that, chapter closes, that devotee goes to Goloka in the self-same body. So it seems like a material birth, but it's not a material birth. But it's in the material world in Krishna's Boma Leela. So it's very, very... Anyway, there's several places where Prabhupada explains this. While playing like a small child with his associates, the Lord killed many demons, including Agasura, Bakasura, Palambasura, and Gardabasura. Hey, Raghava Pandit, Raghava Pandit. What's the Agasura? What kind of animal is Agasura? Do you know?
Yes.
What's that? What did he say?
Snake.
Snake! Very good. And the next one that is mentioned here is Bakasura. What kind of animal or beast is that? Bakasura. Baka. What did he say?
Big bird.
Big bird, you're correct. Pralambasura. What kind of form is Pralambasura? Yeah, pretending to be one of the cowherd boys, but he's really a demon. And finally, Gardabasura. What's Gardabasura?
Fun.
I'll give you a hint that all the residents of New Taliban should know who this demon is. Yes, it's another name for Dhenukasura. Yes, Raghava Pandit, you're correct. Donkey. It's another name for Dhenukasura. Gardabasura. Although he appeared at Vrindavan just as a boy, he was actually like the covered flames of a fire. As a small particle of fire can kindle a great fire with fuel, so the Lord killed all these great demons, beginning from his babyhood in the house of Nanda Maharaj. Srila Prabhupada was explaining in the chapter of the 10th canto, the killing of Aghasura, chapter 12, that every day Krishna and the boys would be so absorbed in their playing that when midday came and it was time to go home for lunch, they wouldn't go home for lunch. Have you ever had that experience? That you get so absorbed in either some playing that you're doing, or some project that you're working on, or something that you get absorbed in, and you just like forget about eating. Like, oh, who cares about lunch? Let's just continue with what we're doing. You ever had that experience? I know I have. Similarly, or we are similar, I should say, to them, the prototype, the cowherd boys would get so absorbed in their play, they wouldn't come home for nothing. Didn't matter how loud their mothers called them. So Yoga Maya would make an arrangement every single day at lunchtime. Prabhupada explains this. What was that arrangement? Yoga Maya would send a demon. Yoga Maya is the internal potency of the Lord who arranges. She's the choreographer, she's the script writer, she's the director. She choreographs Krishna's Leela because she knows what his inner desires are for pleasure and how to please him. So she makes all the arrangements. Okay, it's your turn, enter stage left. Okay, it's your turn, exit stage right. So every time it's time for lunch, every day, she arranges for a demon to be sent. So what would happen? All of a sudden their play would get interrupted. They'd get distracted by this demon. And oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And they, get all alarmed. And every day, Krishna would be the hero and defeat the demon. And kill the demon. And now that their play's been interrupted, thanks a lot. Oh, gee, I guess we're hungry, let's go home for lunch. So then they'd go home for lunch. And then they'd come back in the afternoon and play some more. So, Prabhupada continues, the land of Vrindavan, the Lord's childhood playground, still remains today. And anyone who visits these places enjoys the same transcendental bliss, although the Lord is not physically visible to our imperfect eyes. I have to admit that I've been to such playgrounds of Krishna and have to lament that I didn't feel the same transcendental bliss as when Krishna is personally present. So it's not that the potency of the Leela stans, the places of Krishna's Leela, it's not that potency is not there, it's that our terrible anartas and cloudy consciousness prevent us from perceiving it. So when we go to Vrindavan, we should actually cry. We should actually cry that here I am, and all I'm seeing is a material veneer. I'm not experiencing the real Vrindavan. So let me go to Vrindavan, not to be a nectar hound, but to be a service hound. Let me go to Vrindavan and serve the residents of Vrindavan and hear from the advanced devotees that reside in Vrindavan, so that someday I'll actually be able to experience Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya recommended this land of the Lord as identical with the Lord, and therefore worshipable by the devotees. This instruction is taken up especially by the followers of Lord Chaitanya, known as the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And because the land is identical with the Lord, devotees like Uddhava and Vidura visited these places 5,000 years ago in order to have direct contact with the Lord, visible or not visible. So that's an interesting statement. When we want to have direct contact with somebody, we want to meet them face to face. We don't want to just hear their voice on the phone or see them on, the Zoom camera or something. For us, direct contact means physical, face to face. But here Prabhupada said, devotees like Uddhava, Vidura, etc., they would visit these places of Krishna's Leela and have direct contact with the Lord, visible or not visible. Meaning they could experience the Lord even though he wasn't so-called physically present before their eyes. This is the greatness of the land of Vrindavan and the devotees that reside there. Prabhupada concludes, thousands of devotees of the Lord are still wandering in these sacred places of Vrindavan, and all of them are preparing themselves to go back home, back to Godhead. End of Srila Prabhupada's purport. Now we know from Srila Prabhupada's example that one need not say, well, I want to go back to Godhead, so I'm just going to go to Vrindavan and, spend the rest of my life there. And I'll make sure that I meet death in Vrindavan. I leave my body in Vrindavan, guaranteed, back home, back to Godhead. Prabhupada said like that. If anyone dies in the Holy Dham, guaranteed. But how did Prabhupada show us by his example? Prabhupada was spending, when he was, in his 60s, he was spending a good amount of time in Vrindavan, doing intensive bhajan, living very austerely, getting totally absorbed in shastric study, chanting 64 rounds a day, translating Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, even though he still had no guarantee that he was ever going to leave India and go preach in the West. But he was preparing himself. Then when all arrangements were, coming together, he could see the writing on the wall, he got instruction from, Guru and Super Soul inside. Prabhupada left Vrindavan at the age of 69. And he came to the West. And we all know the story. Abhimanyu, have you watched that video, Your Ever Well-Wisher? Yeah?
No, I haven't.
A good day to watch it is 2 weeks from tomorrow, which is Prabhupada's disappearance day. That's the first day. No, actually, I watched it.
It's 1 week.
1 week?
It's
Oh,
next-
I'm sorry, it's
next
1
Monday.
week. Govardhan Puja's this weekend. Golly. Can't believe it. Yeah, so a week from tomorrow is Prabhupada's disappearance day. And it's a really nice day to watch that video, Your Ever Well-Wisher. It begins from Prabhupada's, taking birth to his passing away. It's really, really nice. And you get to learn how Prabhupada said it was more important to leave Vrindavan and preach the message of Krishna to the world and give other people an opportunity to go back to Godhead than to stay in Vrindavan and just be selfishly concerned about myself going back to Godhead. So, one interesting dichotomy I found in today's purport is the following. In the first paragraph, Prabhupada said that the cowherd boys that were playing with Krishna, they were great rishis and yogis in their previous births. And that after many such pious births, they gained the association of the Lord and played with him on equal terms. But then later, at the end of the second paragraph, Prabhupada was speaking about the trees and birds and beasts that lived in Vrindavan and that took birth there. And he said they were there to give pleasure to the Lord and his eternal associates, the cowherd boys. So there seems to be a little differing view on the position of the cowherd boys. So in the 10th canto, chapter 12, the killing of the demon Aghasura, Shukadeva Goswami Shukadeva Goswami, before he introduces Aghasura's arrival there, he goes through a beautiful description of how the cowherd boys would play with Krishna. It's a very attractive description, how the cowherd boys played. And at the end of his glorifying the play of the cowherd boys, Shukadeva Goswami says, Sakan Vijaru Kritapunya Punja. He says, the cowherd boys, having accumulated the results of pious activities for many, many lives, were able to associate in this way with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How can one explain their great fortune? So Shukadeva Goswami is saying that the cowherd boys are in this glorious position because they've accumulated the results of pious activities for many, many lives. In the next verse, Shukadeva Goswami says that yogis may undergo lifetimes of austerity, and they may become perfect yogis someday, meaning they have complete control of the mind, 100%. But despite all that, the yogis are still unable to taste even a particle of dust from the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What then can we describe about the great fortune of the inhabitants of Vrajabhumi, Vrindavan, with whom the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally lived and who saw the Lord face to face? Prabhupada says in his purport, we can simply imagine the great fortune of the inhabitants of Vrindavan. It is impossible to describe how many, many births of pious activities it is impossible to describe how, after many, many births of pious activities, they have become so fortunate. So Shukadeva Goswami and Srila Prabhupada are saying that it requires many, many births of pious activities to have this opportunity to take birth in Boma Leela and be part of Krishna's pastimes. Prabhupada says it's impossible to describe. Well, here's another statement found in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is Ramananda Roy speaking with Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya is asking Ramananda Roy to disclose the highest pinnacle of perfection in spiritual life. And they come to the point of, Ramananda Roy comes to the point of describing ecstatic love in the mood of Vraj Bhakti, particularly the gopis. So in that discussion, when he comes to his conclusion, he Ramananda Roy says, Janma Koti means thousands of births. Sukritar, Sukriti, pious credits. Na labhyate, it doesn't happen, it's not obtained. Pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be had even by pious activity in hundreds and thousands of lives. It can be attained only by paying one price, that is, intense greed to obtain it. So how are we to reconcile this seeming contradiction here of Shukadeva Goswami followed by Prabhupada's purport, say that the cowherd boys have achieved their fortune by accumulating thousands and thousands of lives of pious credit. And Ramananda Roy saying, it doesn't matter how many thousands of lives of pious credit you've accumulated, you cannot attain pure devotional service. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Prabhupada quotes Bhaktivinoda Thakur in how this is reconciled. According to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you see, when we say the word pious, what are we thinking? Oh, we help a little old lady cross the street. We give in charity, right? We do a bunch of goody-goody acts, right? For good people. Even we perform, Vedic sacrifices, worship the demigods, etc., etc. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says no. In Sanskrit, the word sukriti, there's 3 types of sukriti, he explains. One type of sukriti is called mokshanmukhi sukriti. It means those pious acts which enable one to obtain liberation, impersonal liberation, merging into the Brahman. Then there's bhoganmukhi sukriti, those pious acts which allow one to enjoy, get elevated into higher births of greater enjoyment, higher standard of living. But then there's a 3rd type of sukriti called bhakti unmukhi sukriti. And that is those pious acts which give bhakti credits to one's bank account. Another word is agyata sukriti, unknowingly performing spiritual acts of piety. This would be, for example, you're just walking down the street of New Orleans, you're going shopping or something, it's a nice Saturday afternoon, and lo and behold, you hear ding, 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 and there's the Harinam party. And you just look and see what's that all about? Oh, it's people singing and dancing. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, sure, I'll take one of your pieces of literature. Oh, yeah, okay, sure, here's $1 or $2. They don't know that they're doing any kind of devotee. They don't even know that you're a devotee. It's just like some people singing and being weird out here or whatever. Oh, sure, I'll take one of your, oh, you're doing good work. Yeah, sure, here's $1 or $2. Agyata sukriti, without knowledge. Somebody has done some little service to a devotee. Some little service to the Krishna consciousness movement. That's a bhakti unmukhi sukriti. That is a sukriti, or pious act, that will stay eternally in the bank account of the living entity. And it may take lifetimes. Indeed, Shukadeva Goswami said, it took many, many lifetimes of such bhakti unmukhi sukriti. When he said lifetimes of piety, he meant bhakti unmukhi piety. And when enough of these bhakti unmukhi sukritis pile up in your bank account, then the scales tip, and the next time you meet a devotee or hear the Harinam or whatever, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm ready to surrender. How can I join? And you just inexplicably become attracted to the Krishna consciousness movement and move into the ashram and become a full-time devotee. How did that happen? Was it by chance? So this is the position of the cowherd boys. Prabhupada in one place, a purport said they were great rishis and sages who took birth in Boma Lila. Another second paragraph, he said they were eternal associates. That's a longer discussion which we don't have time to get into, but when Krishna appears in the material world to perform his Boma Lila, he does come with expansions of his eternal associates. Just like Krishna in Boma Lila is an expansion of Krishna in Goloka. So he comes with expansions of his eternal associates, and simultaneously, those who are perfected souls in the material world take birth in that Leela and become intimate associates of the eternal associates. And some of them actually become like, you could almost say Shakti-Vesh avatars of those associates. They become so empowered by them. They become themselves, some of them, partial incarnations of those associates. But that's another discussion which we can't dive into today. So we'll stop there, see if there's any discussion. Okay, then.
Well, isn't, like you were explaining, different types of piety, and then that one of them actually gets the connection with the bhakti. And isn't that what our movement's all about? The Krishna consciousness movement. You know, we've been told and we've read that even just a moment's association with a pure devotee, you could even be a cat or something, you know, and get that special mercy, like prasadam. If the animal takes prasadam, gets a human birth, and then from there on, you know, you can take on your spiritual life.
Exactly.
But isn't when they say that the cowherd boys had to go through just to get that eternal Leela, had to go through so many pious types of, you know, like helping a lady across the street, and then, you know, goes on and on. But that's a lot of lifetimes.
Yeah.
So don't we have kind of a shortcut here in this?
Yeah, so, and when Shukadeva Goswami said that they went through many, many lifetimes of Bhakti Mukhi Sukriti, piety, it doesn't always mean Agyata Sukriti, there's also Gyata Sukriti, doing it with knowledge. So we start off with Agyata Sukriti and build up to Gyata Sukriti, and then build up to different levels of devotional service to pure devotional service. So it can take so many lifetimes that we might just throw in the towel and say, forget it. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by his causeless mercy, has come to spread the Premanand Sankirtan movement. That simply by coming and chanting Hare Krishna in front of Gaur Nitai, rendering some kind of service to the Guru Parampara that is connected to Lord Chaitanya's Sampradaya, we get to take the elevator instead of the stairs. So instead of walking up every single stair for 10,000 flights of stairs, we get to take the express elevator. But that express elevator will only get us there very quickly if we properly, chant the Harinam, avoiding the 10 offenses, etc. So we have the process, we have the express elevator, but are we, taking advantage of it? So we want to go out and give people that opportunity, that invitation to join that express elevator, which is only available during Lord Chaitanya's movement. Otherwise, back to the staircase. Hope you have good leg muscles. Okay, anything else? Okay, so we'll stop there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Sadhu Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.